All right, we are back here on the podcast, getting ready to dive deeper into the college basketball season. Join me today, great friend of the podcast, covers college hoops in the New York Post. Zach Braziller is here with us today. Zach, welcome. How are you?
What's up, man? How are you?
Doing good. Very excited. My favorite time of year when college basketball gets started here. So obviously, there's a lot of stuff going on here. Season's just underway. So, what are some storylines you're tracking early in the year?
Yeah, I mean, the freshmen clearly are to me the big storyline as we enter the year. You know, AJ DeBonta at BYU and Darren Peterson at Kansas and Cameron Boozer at Duke. Like, all three looked absolutely incredible in the preseason, and all three are really in the running for that number one pick. You have other really good freshmen: Nate Ament at Tennessee, Braylon Mullins at UConn. There are a bunch of other ones. The freshman class is absolutely. Look, it was good last year. It is absolutely loaded. It's really fun. I forgot Michael Brown at Louisville, their point guard. I mean, that to me is really the number one storyline as we get going here. Just an absolutely phenomenal freshman class, it looks like.
Yeah, it'll be fun to see how these. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No.
Yeah. I say I love seeing some of these freshmen get these opportunities and this stuff here, and a lot of local intrigue, including obviously St. John's. Last year they win the Big East title, regular and tournament. Have a disappointing end of the NCAA to lose the second round to Arkansas as a 2 seed. Rick Pitino reloads his roster in the transfer portal. A bunch of big names coming in here. Ranked 5 in the AP polls preseason. Ranked number 1 the Big East coaches poll for preseason. So, what are some stuff you're tracking with St. John's this year?
Yeah, look, they're incredibly high expectations. You can make the argument the highest expectations in this program this century. You mentioned preseason top 5. It's the highest they've ever been ranked in the preseason. They were picked to win the Big East. It's the first time they've been the preseason pick since 1991. They have a very new team. The only returning starter is Zuby Ejiofor. They brought in the top-ranked transfer class in the country. A really good group: Ian Jackson from Carolina, Joe San from Arizona State, Bryce Hopkins from Providence, Dylan Mitchell, Osiah Sellers, Dylan Darling. I mean, it's a really good group. Now, the one thing with them is the schedule is really hard. Like, it's a very new team, and it's going to probably take some time, and they don't really have a lot of time. Alabama, second game of the year, they go to Vegas for the Players Era Festival. They go to Atlanta to play Kentucky. Ole Miss comes in. It's a really, really good non-conference schedule. So look, they're not going to enter the tournament this year with 4 losses like last year. But I do think they could be a more dangerous team when you look at March, because I think they're a much better shooting team. They have more depth, especially up front. So, they're not going to. It's going to be different from last year because they don't. Last year they had 2 point guards. This year they don't really have necessarily that one guy running the show. But I do think it's going to be a very good team, and I think a team that's going to be capable of going on more of a run than they did last year.
Yeah, I would agree with that. In terms of the schedule situation here, I think you made a great point, because I think last year when they saw Arkansas in the NCAA tournament, they sort of had a reality check of, okay, like, this is the kind of physicality and talent level we're going to be dealing with in the March Madness here. And I know expectations are down for the Big East year, so I feel like it's a good job by Pitino to put together schedule. Yeah, they're not going to lose only 4 games again, but they might be better situated for the rigors of March Madness, playing these various levels of quality teams in November and December.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's aggressive. They get the Alabama, Ole Miss, and Kentucky, 3 really good SEC programs. The 2 Big 12 teams I mentioned, and then a third in Vegas. We'll see who it can be. Could be like a Kansas or a Tennessee type. So yeah, it's a really good schedule. I know Rick said the other day he's got some trepidation about it just because they have such a new team. But look, they played an exhibition with Michigan last Saturday, and they look pretty good. There were some issues, but they lost in overtime to a Michigan team that's ranked in the top 10 and does bring back a decent amount of players, especially in their backcourt. And the St. John's front court was really good. Ejiofor, Hopkins, and Mitchell look like a terrific trio. Pitino, I think they're going to play them a lot together. I think they're going to start them because they Mitchell and Zuby can really guard on the perimeter, which enables you to play big. It's going to be interesting, got to see how it works. But they looked the part against Michigan, which has one of the premier front courts in the country. So it's an interesting team. It's a very different team than last year, but I think they're gonna play faster. They're like a tempo team in the 50s. I expect them to be top 20 this year. They're going to look to play fast. They're going to look to push. They're going to look to score in transition, and they're going to take more threes than they did last year. I don't think there's any question about that. And yeah, I think it's going to be a really fun team.
Yeah, go talk about their biggest competition here. The Big East is UConn, picked 4th in the AP poll, ahead of them in there, despite the fact they're picked 2nd in the conference poll. A lot of returning talent for Dan Hurley's team. This team's trying to win contend for his 3rd title in 4 years. Caravan's still there. Solo Ball's still there. Hurley did a good job in the transfer portal, especially bringing in guys like Demery and Malachi Smith. What do you think about UConn this year?
Yeah, look, I think UConn's very good. I really look at St. John's and UConn as a toss-up. You want to pick them. You want to pick UConn to win the league. You want to pick St. John's to win the league. To me, it can kind of go either way. I think each team has an issue. St. John's, obviously, you have the questions at point guard. UConn, you have questions about defending. They were not a good defensive team last year. I know they brought in Demery and Smith who can defend, but to me, they still have the same issues in the paint. Paris Reed is not a rim protector. He's never been a real big-time defender. And now they really need that. They need him to take a step up defensively. He's going to score. He's going to get his rebounds, but he's got to be better kind of, protecting that rim. Like Samson Johnson was their rim protector last year. And even with him, they struggled to defend, and you take him out of there, to me, that's the big question. I think they're going to be better defensively. The question is how much better they're going to be. But look, I think they're clearly one of the best offensive teams in the country. They'll get the kid Mullins back from his ankle injury probably sometime, I would think early to mid-December. That'll help. I can see some guys taking leaps. Some of the guys they brought back, they have a lot of continuity, which is always important. I think they're going to be very good. I think St. John's and UConn are legit top 10 teams in the country, and I would be surprised if those aren't the top 2 teams in the league. I do like Creighton a lot. I think Creighton is clearly the best of the rest. They're by far the 3rd best team in this conference. I don't think there's any question about that. I know there's some people that are big on Georgetown, and I do think Georgetown's improved, but I think Creighton is clearly the 3rd best team in this league.
Yeah, and we talk about how great the schedule was for St. John's. UConn also, Dan Hurley's there's credit for putting together a very strong schedule. I guess probably also worry about the quality of the Big East to challenge his team. I mean, they're playing BYU in Boston in a few weeks. They got Arizona coming in. They have the Illinois game at the Garden, Kansas at Allen Fieldhouse, Florida Jimmy V Classic, just to name a few. They did a really good job testing themselves outside the league. Yeah,
they both St. John's and UConn, Creighton always plays a really good schedule, did a good job. And to me, you had to. If you're St. John's or UConn or Creighton to a lesser extent, and you want to get a top 2 or 3 seed in the tournament, you need to play that tough schedule because there aren't that many wins that are going to move the needle in the conference. I mentioned the big 3. Providence has talent, but obviously there are major questions with Kim English. I think Kim and Willard will do a good job at Villanova, but the talent level isn't great this year. Marquette, Shock Smart continues to ignore the portal. They're, to me, probably a bubble team, in that realm. So yeah, if you're St. John's or UConn and you want to have a shot at a 1 or a 2 seed, you better schedule well, or it's going to be hard to get that.
It is going to be hard to get that here. And sticking at the Big East theme here, I want to touch on Seton Hall for a minute because obviously, it's been a tough run for Shaw over there because he has the great first year, gets snubbed for the tournament, wins the NIT, everybody leaves. Their feisty parts last year, not really doing much. This year, projected towards the bottom of the league. How do you feel Shaw is doing building the program over there?
It's obviously really tough. They don't have a lot of money. They don't have a general manager, which is something that they should really, figure out. In this era, you don't have players. It's hard to win. You don't have money. It's hard to win. And that's been one thing that, is tough for him. But look, he did not do a good job last year. He'll be quick to admit it. I don't think there's any question. I think they'll be better this year. How much better? We'll see. Could they finish 8th or 9th in the league? Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think the bottom of the league is pretty soft. I do like Bud Clark, the transfer they brought in, a really, really quick, athletic, talented point guard, albeit undersized. They have some other intriguing pieces, but yeah, I mean, when you have teams that are payrolls, in the 10 million range, and you're at 2 or 3, it's hard to compete. I have a hard time putting that on the coach when he just doesn't have the same resources as other coaches in the league.
Yeah, and you mentioned the Big East very soft here. Obviously, it feels like we can tell from the preseason polls that the national media as a whole does not respect the conference here. Nobody outside the 3 ranked teams got even votes to be in the top 25. So, is this a year you feel like that you would be surprised they get more than 4 bids to the tournament at the Big East?
I think they can get 5. And look, they don't. I don't think anyone besides the Big 3 deserves it. I like Providence's roster, but Tim English has never made the tournament as a Division I head coach. He did an awful job last year. There's no reason that you got to. Providence has to prove it. Ed Cooley has to prove it. Georgetown has not done a good job at Georgetown. And now look, I think their science is turning. Their recruiting is improving. They got a big time recruit the other day. They go in and they beat a Kentucky team that was shorthanded. It's an exhibition game, and that was impressive. I think they brought in some winning players. KJ Lewis from Arizona is a winning player. Malik Mack, I think, is ready to take a step forward. I'm worried about that front court, with Georgetown after losing Sorber. But, maybe Georgetown's ready to take a leap. But they didn't. There's nothing that says they should have been receiving votes. Marquette lost its 3 best players and is counting on internal development to replace them. So I do think to be a 5-bid league, I think 2 of Georgetown, Marquette, and Providence can make the tournament. And to me, at this stage right now, 5 bids would be a good year. But the league had a bad non-conference last year. They got to do better non-conferences. There's no question. And I'm not talking St. John's and UConn. I'm talking really kind of the middle tier. Has to get some big wins so where they could be kind of, top 30, 40 teams in the country in the analytics. And that just really hasn't been the case the last year or 2.
Yeah, let's go to the Big Ten for a minute with Rutgers. Obviously, it's a very different experience for them when they had the 2 lottery picks last year and don't even come close to making the tournament. This year feels like a complete rebuild for Pikiell at Rutgers here. They're projected towards the bottom of the Big Ten here. How do you feel like he's set up right now this year? I feel like this could be a very long year for him.
I mean, last year was a long year. They had 2 top 5 picks. It's hard to be optimistic about Rutgers right now. They're picked near the bottom of the Big Ten, I think 17th out of 18, and it's kind of similar to Seton Hall to me. Maybe not quite the situation, but it is similar to Seton Hall, where they don't have the resources that these other schools do. Now, part of it with Rutgers is football, and so much of that is going to football. But yeah, it's hard. It's hard to see a lot of reasons for optimism. I know Pikiell has tried to be as positive as possible. He's told them this is kind of more my style, under-recruited guys. We're going to be a really good defense team. We're going to play really hard, and that's all well and good, but you still need talent. And I just in a league like the Big Ten, and I just don't see it. To me, if you maybe go a game over 2 over 500 overall, and you play in the Crown, that would probably be a good year. It's hard. It's hard to see anything better than that when you just look at this roster. And I know he's I've always felt like he's a really good coach. Same thing with Shaheen Holloway, but when you're facing there's only dollar only goes so far. When you're facing teams that just have significantly more talent and better players than you, it's hard to beat them.
Yeah, it is hard to beat them. I mean, last year they didn't even make the conference tournament here, and you wonder, are they going to be good enough to get in this year? I feel like if they get there and they're feisty, I think that's a win for Pikiell, starting with Davis roster. Yeah,
I mean, we'll see. I mean, I know they're kind of trying to build it the way they used to, and on toughness and grit and all that stuff. But he had those Rutgers teams. He has best Rutgers teams. They had players, man. They had Geo Baker. They had Ron Harper Jr. They had Cliff Omarui. They had players. Like yes, they were developed, but they had good players. Like it's it's a tough spot to get excited if you're a Rutgers fan, just because last year there was so much hype. You had the two superstar freshmen, and it just did not go your way. And now this year, is kind of like you're starting over.
Yeah, it is here, and obviously, one of the fun things about the college basketball season, obviously, is like there's a lot of mid majors around the area here who have a chance to be interesting, and like obviously a couple of leagues, like a lot of focus in the areas. Obviously, the MAC, you got Wagner's conference, you have the A10 presence with Fordham here. Like on the mid front, what's intriguing you this year?
No, I'm interested to see what Cruz Davis does in year two at Hofstra. He was very good for them. His first year he was with St. John's, and Iona transfer. He's a first-team All-League player in the preseason in the CAA. I know I've heard their shooting is improved, might be a little better defensively. So we'll see kind of what happens at Hofstra. You have new coaches at Fordham and Iona, and Columbia. So new eras in all those places. There's definitely some intriguing stuff going on. Wagner, you have the Donald Copeland currently suspended, and they're not really talking much about it. They made Dwight McMillan the interim head coach, so that's obviously an interesting story to follow. There are definitely some fun storylines going around. New coaches, a suspended coach, I think Cruz Davis could become one of the better mid-major guards in the country this year. So definitely some fun stuff.
Yeah, I know you mentioned this earlier. It's funny how you said like Seton Hall in the Big East does not have a GM. I know it was odd. I saw it pinged to my radar. Obviously, you could say what you want, but whether Tobin Anderson deserve more time than I own. I personally fell in that camp, but they seem to pivot hard into we're going to try and get with the times. We have a coach with NBA ties. We have a GM, which some Big East schools, like Seton Hall, don't. Like, that'll be interesting to see how that works at that level.
Yeah, no question about it. They hired a coach with strong NBA ties, and I know there's a certain section of people in Iona who've wanted to move up to the Atlantic 10 in recent years, and that never really came about. I think they were picked sixth in the MAC, so obviously the expectations are somewhat muted there. St. John's will actually see the number one preseason team in the MAC, Quinnipiac, and Amari Monroe, which should be a fun one on Monday night. I'm excited. I'm almost done with all my preview material, so I'm ready to go. I'm sick of writing previews.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff here. A couple things to wrap up here. So, like, if you had to make your picks right now, give me like a couple contenders you feel like you like to win the title this year, and a couple of teams you feel like are not getting enough notice. You feel like could make noise this year.
All right. Well, the Final Four in Sunday's paper I picked was UCLA, Arkansas, Kansas, and Kentucky, and I picked Kentucky to win it all. I really think UCLA is being slept on. They bring back good players. They add Donovan Dent, who, in my opinion, is either the best point guard or the second best point guard in the country. You want to argue about Braden Smith, that's understandable. Donovan Dent is terrific. Comes out of New Mexico. He's super athletic, super quick, really shoot. I think he's going to be fantastic there. I think UCLA is going to be one of the best teams in the Big Ten. I really like Arkansas's roster. I think they bring in two fantastic freshman guards in a Cuff and Thomas. Bring back a lot from last year's Sweet 16 team. They really should have made the Elite Eight. They choked. Well, not, but they blew a late lead to Texas Tech. I think Kentucky's roster is terrific. I know they lost to Georgetown. It's exhibition. It doesn't matter. They have incredible depth. I mean, they should. They have payroll reportedly around 20 mil. Those are kind of, and then Kansas, there's kind of feel like they're undervalued. They have Peterson to me is going to be the best player in the country. I picked him to be the national player of the year. I think he's absolutely fantastic. So yeah, those are my four.
Yeah, I like that Kansas pick. I feel like Self has learned something in the portal, and the past, I feel like he's gone big game hunting, like especially with the Hunter Dickinson era. I feel like now he's picking guys who fit his style more. I think that's going to pay off for them in a big way.
Yeah, I like their team. I think the big kid Floyd Badunga is going to be is a breakout guy, and him and Peterson together should be fantastic. And yeah, I mean, it's funny. I think when, you know, sometimes these big schools are undervalued, it kind of gives them a chip on their shoulder. And I think that Kansas will have that this year.
All right, last question here. Obviously, we are just underway in the season here. We had a big game opening night with Arizona and Florida. Like that's an intriguing game to start the year. A lot of more intriguing non-conference games early because some of these teams realize we need to stack our schedule to get these quality wins to stand out in the selection process here. So, what are some games you're keeping an eye on the next few weeks that you're going to say, okay, I know for most of the New York area, okay, we don't pay attention to college sports until like after the NFL season ends. So, like, what would you say?
Oh,
Are your
NFL season's over anyway. I mean,
yeah, I
at
mean,
least around here.
yeah, well, yeah, you got plenty of people still gambling on the other games in your fantasy teams. So, I mean, like, the casual audience says this fine NFL regardless. Like, if you were telling people, these are my college games I want you to watch and you'll have some fun, what would you pick?
Yeah, look, there are a few. Early December, UConn, Florida should be fantastic. The Jimmy V Classic, I think that's obviously going to be terrific. That's one. I think St. John's, Kentucky is going to, early December or mid-December is going to be terrific. It's Pitino going back to face his old captain, Mark Pope, in Atlanta, so it's going to be a raucous environment. I think that's terrific. I love Kentucky, Louisville. To me, that's a heated rivalry, two Final Four caliber teams, awesome guards. And then look, Vegas is absolutely loaded. I mean, Tennessee, Houston play in I believe I think it's the second night or second day they play. That's going to be an absolute war. I mean, it's a lot of really good non-conference early, which is great. It helps the sport build momentum. We don't need to see these 40-point blowouts. And, I'm just really excited to get going here.
Yeah, I do love this trend towards getting more of these games, and I think it's important for the sport to try and like have more of these matchups float more early, try and get in people's minds, say, hey, you don't have to wait until January to watch these games. There's good stuff going on from November on.
Absolutely.
All right, Zach, thanks for all the time. Really appreciate it. People want to follow you on social media. Keep up with your college hoops coverage of the Post. How can they do that?
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Mike. I appreciate the time.
Absolutely, Zach. Thanks for all the time. Really appreciate it.
All right, man. Have a good one, okay?